This is a recording of a mock review of the Violence Reduction Council. This is an example of the types of individuals and agencies that would participate in a case review, the types and level of detail of information that is shared in a case review, and the discussion that occurs that leads to the development of recommendations for prevention and intervention. Violence reduction councils are a public health-based model to prevent violence within cities. Violence reduction councils bring together criminal justice, public health, social service agencies, and community-based organizations involved in violence prevention. Collectively, these groups review homicides and assault information at the aggregate and case level. Each Violence Reduction Council review team shares unique case information about the victim and suspect involved, neighborhood-level factors, and perspectives about broader trends of violence in the city. From these case discussions, members of the council identify gaps or weaknesses in policy and practice and system barriers to violence prevention. The Violence Reduction Council then proposes recommendations to address these barriers and enhance the city's violence prevention infrastructure. A smaller Violence Reduction Council working group refines these recommendations and works with city leadership to advance them to policy and programmatic changes. So this is a mock review. It's a fictitious case in a fictitious community. The agencies that are represented in this particular case review include public health, law enforcement, community-based organizations, community violence intervention, and neighborhood services, as well as probation and parole. And there is a facilitator that will lead the discussion of the case review. Normally, if we were doing a case review, we would have everybody go around the room and introduce themselves, their agency, their role, and we would ask them to participate in an icebreaker. The idea is that we're really trying to get all of the members to participate and feel comfortable in sharing their information and comfortable in sharing their ideas and thoughts around prevention and intervention. Thanks, you guys, for coming today. Great to see everybody. Appreciate that you all brought your computers because I know that means you have ready access to all of your files. So thank you. I want to just go over and, even though we all know each other and we meet regularly, just give a high-level overview of the purpose of a Violence Reduction Council for review. Remember, what we're trying to do here is develop a shared understanding of the homicides in our community, and we are looking for those missed opportunities for intervention and prevention. And we're going to really be thinking together about recommendations and new ways that we can think about doing things to address those identified issues that we develop through the review process. This isn't about blaming anybody or looking for the one bad apple. It's really to figure out what we can do better together. So we're thinking about our own organizations as well as how we all work together. I'm not going to have you all do introductions because we all know each other, but we would. We might even do an icebreaker, but we're going to pass on that today. But Nandita, can you tell us a little bit about what's happened since our last meeting?
Sure. So regarding services for youth, the position that we discussed last meeting has been posted, so please circulate it in your networks. The licensed premise subcommittee finalized the draft of the city ordinance with Alderwoman Hogan, and that will prohibit liquor sales after midnight and will be going to the City Council's Public Safety Committee for approval. And our recommendation to the State Police Association regarding training on forensic interviews for children who witness violence was presented to the Executive Committee of the State's Police Association, and for that we received a favorable response, and we have a follow-up meeting with them next week to fine-tune implementation. And I'll just go on and talk about some of our upcoming events. So the grant application for our proposed rapid response shooting protocol is due next month, so we may be reaching out to you with some requests for information. So for the data report out, as always, we're going to start with a quick look at this year's numbers so far for homicides and non-fatal shootings. So we're continuing to see an increase in incidences among 15 to 24-year-old males. the Falls neighborhood has continued to experience elevated firearm violence, and our first case today occurred in the Falls. And this is the case that we'll be focusing on today. So based on the data, this is how we came up with our case selection. Over the last 12 months, we've had 11 incidents of firearm violence at after-set parties, resulting in 3 homicides and 9 non-fatal shootings. This is up from last year when we had 2 incidents with 3 non-fatal shootings, and a shooting from a recent after-set party will be our first case today. Just briefly, to get us all on the same page, an after-set party is generally a transient club without regulations. They're promoted on social media and flyers. There is an entry fee charge, alcohol and drugs for sale, often stripper poles, and live entertainment like a DJ or an artist.
Awesome, thank you. Any questions on how the cases were selected for today? Okay, so before we actually get into the case review, I want to remind everybody about confidentiality. We're going to talk about the case, we're going to talk about individuals in the case, and we want to remind everybody that what we discuss here stays here. General findings can be shared, recommendations, but nothing specific to the case. You can take notes if you want to take notes, but we're going to want to collect those when we leave, when you all leave. And you've signed a confidentiality form. Nandita, did everybody hand those in?
Yep, we're all set.
Awesome. Okay, so then what I would like to do is briefly cover the ground rules, just as a quick reminder for everybody. And if there's any that you think we should entertain, let's talk about those. So a reminder that this is, that we have a shared goal for prevention, that you all are coming prepared with your data and your information. You're going to be curious and ask questions. We're going to maintain and protect the confidentiality. You're going to be on time, which you all were, so thank you for being here. Treat all members equally. Refer to members by their first name. And remember, we do that so that this is really a place where there's trust, that we all know each other. So we go by first name, taking out all of the titles, because we all have important information to share and ideas to share. Only one person speaks at a time, and you know I have a hard time with that, but I'll do my best. Active listening is important, so listen to what everybody else is saying. And remember that we're tackling problems. We're not tackling people. Again, getting back to this isn't blame. We try not to use acronyms, and if we do, we'll explain. And if you don't know the acronym, you can do the acronym, and we'll pause and give the definition. That we can agree to disagree, because we all come from different places. And we're not always going to see things the same way, but we can agree that we may disagree. That we use appropriate and sensitive language when we're talking about the case. We use first-person language, such as person using drugs versus a drug addict. And we're actively identifying those recommendations. So as we're thinking and we're discussing, be always thinking about what could we have done? What could we have done differently? And then finally, the last is the AA rule, adding ideas or providing alternatives. So if I'm sharing, I think that we should have more water and snacks, you all could say, yeah, I think we should have apples and cookies and... Cool?
Sounds great.
Awesome. All right, so we've done the ground rules. I'm going to give us just a really high-level overview of the cases that we have 2 cases that we've selected, as Nandita said. We're going to get started with the first one. High level. The night was August 15th. There was an after-set party that was held at an abandoned warehouse on the east side of the city, and it ended in tragedy when a shooting erupted at 2:30 a.m. The decedent was a 21-year-old male. His name was James Richardson. He had no criminal record. The event, promoted on social media, charged an entry fee, featured alcohol sales, there was live entertainment, and unregulated security presence was at the party. They drew over 200 people, and then the chaos started to unfold. There was a large turnout, which resulted in congestion in the surrounding streets, with cars parked haphazardly, and groups of people spilling into the roadway in front of the warehouse. Residents had reported noise disturbances and expressed concerns about the safety due to the lack of crowd control. One victim was shot and died en route to the hospital. The medical examiner could not be here today because she has to participate, unfortunately, in a homicide trial, but she did share with me the following information. The medical examiner's report confirmed that James Richardson sustained 3 gunshot wounds to the chest. The report indicated that the shots were fired at close range, suggesting the shooter was within a few feet of the victim. The toxicology report showed no remarkable findings, ruling out the presence of alcohol or other controlled substances in Richardson's system at the time of his death. And the cause of death was listed as multiple gunshot wounds with no evidence of defensive injuries. Cass, can you share with us a little bit about the investigation from the police department?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So, as Mallory said, the call came in at 2:30 in the morning. Officers from District 2 responded and arrived, and backup was called because there were just a large number of people on the scene. From interviews, we learned that security at the venue was minimal, with really no screening for weapons at the entrance, and several groups that are long-standing rivals were in attendance, including OVC, which is Old Vale and Kane Streets, and the McCallboys. EMS responded as well, and the victim was transported to a level 1 trauma center. Unfortunately, he died en route to the hospital. As mentioned, he didn't have a history with us, meaning that he hadn't been arrested or investigated really in any manner within our jurisdiction. Witnesses reported that Richardson was attempting to defuse an argument between 2 other individuals when shots were fired. His family described him as a hardworking individual, and he was actually working as an electrical apprentice. Eyewitnesses identified one suspect fleeing the scene immediately after the shooting. Surveillance footage from a nearby business that we got captured the individual getting into a dark-colored sedan, and that person was identified as a 22-year-old male, Marcus Taylor. He wasn't necessarily on our radar, but is currently on supervised parole. We had some contact with him earlier in the week regarding a dispute up at a bar, and that information was shared with his parole agent. Regarding the firearm, ballistics analysis confirmed that it was a 9mm handgun, which was later recovered from a storm drain, and that was what was used in the shooting. And it was determined the firearm was reported stolen 5 years ago from a vehicle. So through NIBIN, the National Integrated Ballistic Imaging Network, it was determined that that gun was also used in 2 prior shootings. So we've got some links there. One shooting was in 2023 in the 2400 block of Shepherd, and the other just about a month ago on the 6500 block of Falls Road. Our department completed the investigation, interviewing witnesses, collecting forensic evidence, and he was arrested. The suspect was arrested 6 days later and charged with secondary murder, illegal firearm possession, and reckless endangerment. Prosecutors have issued charges, and the victim witness advocate is working with the victim's family. Community-based organizations, including community violence interrupters, are also working with the residents.
I have a question. What details are known about the bar altercation Marcus was in a week prior?
Yeah, sure. Good question. So surveillance footage from the bar showed that Marcus Taylor was arguing with someone that we weren't able to identify related to a girlfriend. Additionally, Taylor has been long associated with McCallboys, which have grown up on that block in the area. There's been about a 30-year rivalry between the McCallboys and the OVC, leading authorities to think maybe was there some kind of retaliation as a motive. Social media posts linked Taylor kind of hinted at a brewing conflict. There were some cryptic messages referencing some past disputes.
Okay. Do we know anything about the individual Taylor got into the altercation with at the party?
So we didn't get a lot from our eyewitness interviews. Someone said he arrived with several OVC members, leading us to think he may sort of been an affiliate of the OVC crew, but we couldn't confirm that. And he fled the scene and hasn't yet made a public statement.
Thanks, Cass. That was great. Carla, do you or the CVI team, your CVI team, have anything that you can add on the individuals?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Mallory. So several members of our team did receive texts in the middle of the night, and we activated immediately. Obviously, rumors that it was between the McCall boys and OVC was very concerning for us, having negotiated a non-aggression agreement between the two that has held for over a year now. So we sent one of our violence interrupters to OVC, who grew up with those guys. One of our other violence interrupters went directly to the McCall boys. And the McCall boys asserted that there was no reason to break the non-aggression agreement. And while I can't divulge all of the information here, our understanding is that while the individual Taylor, our suspect, got into an altercation with and did arrive with the OVC crew, he was not an OVC member. And the dispute escalated with this individual looking at Taylor's girlfriend the wrong way. So there was a real potential for misunderstanding to spiral, especially with social media posts flying around and people making assumptions and folks just generally feeling disrespected. But I explained to the OVC guys what I was hearing, that the beef was not about them, and long story short, they agreed not to escalate the situation. So we definitely got lucky this time. A few key people made the decision to step back and not escalate, but it underscores the danger of these unregulated parties.
Wow, thank you so much. And thank you for your team and the quick response. I think that clearly made a difference in additional shootings. Nick, you were our perpetrator Marcus's parole agent, correct?
Yes.
Can you share a little bit?
Thanks, Mallory. Yeah, I'm Taylor's parole agent. Thanks for having me at this meeting. Taylor's on supervision for an aggravated assault and has been complying with the conditions of his supervision. He was released from Pine Prison June 2024. He's been attending parenting classes or working to complete his GED. He's also working for a friend in home renovations. In the days leading up to the shooting, I attempted to reach out to him a few times, but received no response from him.
Was there something that led you to make multiple contacts? And can you share a little bit about the level of supervision and support that Taylor was receiving?
Yeah, because of the information sharing we now have in place for one of the VRC recommendations, I was notified he was involved in several altercations and was trying to reach in to see how I might best assist. He was on what we call enhanced supervision, which includes bi-weekly check-ins, curfew monitoring, and mandatory participation in behavioral programming. Aside from his required conditions, he was linked to a community-based reentry navigator through one of our nonprofit partners. We provided referrals to both a mental health counselor, parenting classes, and a job readiness program. Although to my knowledge, he's not followed either of those.
I love it when we can see our recommendations in action. So we have that police department, probation, parole, information sharing, and it's working. Do you have any thoughts about what we might think about doing differently?
Yeah, absolutely agree. Information sharing in this case did work in that law enforcement flagged Taylor's bar altercation, and that allowed me to follow quickly. But the gap is really in what happened after that. We got the information, but we didn't escalate it in a way that triggered an in-person or a higher level intervention. Looking back, I think we could have convened a quick case staffing with our violence interrupter partners. Even though it wasn't an arrest, the recent conflict should have been enough to put him on our radar for additional outreach in the first place.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Am I hearing a potential recommendation?
Yeah, for sure. I think I'll follow up with Carla and see what we can do together.
Ruth, do you have any thoughts?
Sure. These after-set parties, they're a huge concern for us, especially when they pop up in these places like the Falls. They're unregulated, there's no security. They draw people from across the city, including individuals with active conflicts. From a prevention standpoint, I think there's a few things we can do. So first, a community alert system. We've heard from residents that they often know when these parties are going to happen. They see the flyers on social or they hear it through word of mouth. If we had a lower barrier way for them to report that anonymously, even just through a text line or a community liaison, we might be able to get ahead of them. And then second, property accountability. We need to work with code enforcement and property owners. So many of these warehouses have absentee landlords or entities that haven't secured the building. If we could flag properties frequently used for these parties, we might be able to get these legal tools in place, like nuisance abatement or emergency closures. And third, youth engagement alternatives. So let's be real, part of why ASPs are so popular is because there's not much else going on that feels fun or safe for young people in that age range. We need late night, youth-friendly spaces that are actually appealing. That's something we can build towards with the right partners.
Well, I just wrote those down.
Great.
Great recommendations. Maybe now's a good time to hear from Caitlin at Neighborhood Services.
Yeah, thanks. Those were really good ideas, Ruth. So thanks for sharing. The warehouse where the afterset party took place had been abandoned for several years. It had been previously cited for zoning violations, unauthorized gatherings, and other safety hazards. The structure lacked proper occupancy permits, fire exits, and basic security measures. These kinds of spaces, just don't pop out of nowhere. They're a product of disinvestment, weak enforcement, capacity, and missed opportunities to partner with the community, kind of like what Ruth was saying. At one point in time, about 4 years ago, city officials had attempted to secure this particular building on multiple occasions, but trespassers frequently broke in and used the space for unauthorized events like this.
Yeah, what happened with that?
Good question. At that time, we were actually coordinating with Ruth and her team and other local organizations to revitalize the area. We had murals going up, we had pop-up cleanups, and a lot of momentum to really reactivate this abandoned industrial space. Unfortunately, the energy was just not sustainable. Funding dried up, the neighborhood association lost key leadership, and honestly, our department was stretched really thin and we had competing priorities. Enforcement shifted to higher visibility zones, and that attention pulled back, and then these spaces unfortunately became visible again.
So you've been thinking about this quite a bit. Do you have any thoughts that things like generally or from a neighborhood services perspective?
Yeah, sure. So a few strategies that we're discussing internally and of course would love your all collaboration on. This includes, the first is a vacant property task force. And so this is a way to reactivate, bring in CNS, fire, law enforcement, police, and other community representatives to identify or intervene in these hot vacant sites before they become party hubs. This is fast-tracking nuisance property designations and improving follow-through on citations. The other thing is real-time property alerts. And so we're exploring ways to build a real-time notification system that alerts CNS when there's unusual activity in a known vacant property, whether that's spikes in noise complaints, social media event tagging, or crowd buildup. And we think this could trigger same-day visit sites or even mobile patrols. The third thing is we've been talking with the city attorney's office about creating civil penalties or cease and desist mechanisms for repeat organizers of unauthorized events. There's often a pattern, the same people but different locations, and we need to start to build that accountability.
Wow, thank you. That's great.
Yeah, thanks.
And those are great recommendations. We'll come back to that.
Great.
Carla, did your team have any additional?
Yeah, thanks, Mallory. So first, I just want to echo Ruth's comments earlier that we need to provide some alternatives for these parties. At the moment, a lot of the young adults drawn to these after-set parties are in that 18 to 24 age range, like post-high school, not yet stable in employment, maybe disconnected from traditional services. And our programming is really strong for younger teens and families. We've invested in that for a long time, but we really don't currently have sort of targeted engagement for this group. And they're looking for connection, they're looking for status, excitement, and unfortunately these parties are offering that more than our services currently are. So we've been thinking that maybe we could get some funds to host some events ourselves and let some local DJs and rappers maybe get some exposure, but ensure no weapons are brought in and the crowds remain reasonable. So Ruth, maybe we can touch base about your organization helping us put together a grant from the Arts and Entertainment
Yeah, I love that. Maybe we can get the performers to spread some anti-violence messaging here and there, or maybe that's too uncool.
Either way, I think it's a great idea. Okay, so we have had lots of recommendations just from this one case. Thank you all for being thoughtful and good listeners and jumping in. I'm going to summarize quickly what I heard in this quick case review that we've done, and let me know if I'm missing anything. The first one that we talked about was Nick and Carla are going to get together and see if there's something that you all can do from a corrections and CBI perspective with individuals that are on supervision. Ruth, you brought some great ideas about a community alert system, property accountability, and youth engagement. Caitlin, you brought up a few that you're already working on with vacant property task forces, real-time property alerts, and really looking at who's organizing these parties. And then the last one we just talked about with Carla and Ruth is thinking about what can we do for that age group that seem to be missing some services and find alternatives for these parties. Did I miss anything or did I get them all? Okay. So I want to just make sure that as we think about how we work on these together, that we're mindful, Caitlin, that you've already started working on yours. So we can talk about it at our working group discussion and figure out how we can assist you. And Ruth, if there are ways that we can help move your ideas forward, we all are here. And I think that's the beauty of it, that some of these you're going to need the assistance of our friend Cass here from law enforcement, neighborhood services, and youth engagement. So it's really, we all get to see each other again. All right, so we have another case that we were going to do today that was also regarding a bad outcome at an after-set party. But given that we only have 20 minutes left, which doesn't really give us enough time to get through all of the case material, I'm going to say let's pause, and we can bring that up at our next meeting. So please bring the information that you've already gathered to our next discussion. If you have brought any data or summary reports, can you share those with Nandita so that we can reference those as we're entering the data into the Violence Reduction Council data system? And remember that what we talked about here today is confidential and it stays here, unless you want to start talking about the amazing recommendations and who else we might need to pull in, because it may not be all of us. There may be additional subject matter experts that we need to bring to the table. And if there's anything about the meeting that we did today that you think we could improve upon, let's talk about that, because this is clearly a process where we're not only trying to improve the way we all interact together, but how we do our case reviews. Looking ahead, we do have a recommendation subcommittee meeting next week on Wednesday. It's going to be a Zoom meeting, so hopefully we can all attend that. And then the governing committee is meeting in about 3 weeks. So we're going to want to bring our findings and recommendations to that. So it may be, depending on where we land after our recommendations meeting, that you may participate in the executive committee meeting so that you can share the progress. We've just completed our annual report, which is really exciting, and we'll be sharing that at the executive meeting with all of the findings and recommendations from 2024. And we've been tracking all of our data in the Violence Reduction Council data system, so we really have been monitoring our progress, so we've got a lot to show for the work that we've done together. Our next meeting is May 23rd at 10 a.m., so we'll start with that case, and we'll pick one more case, so we actually have two to discuss. And I just want to talk a little bit about taking care of ourselves as we leave. Let's pause for a moment and remember James Richardson and the others that we've discussed today. They were loved and valued members of our community, and let's honor them with a moment of silence. So as we transition out of this space and talking about this case, I invite you to take 3 deep breaths and imagine yourself stepping outside, feeling the sun, and letting the meeting settle. I know it's really hot out, but does anyone want to share how they'll transition back into the day?
I might go for a short walk, just to kind of give myself a moment before jumping back into meetings.
Good call.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm just going to reflect about how important this work is, that James Richardson is not just a number, and having gratitude for all of you who are doing this work together.
Thanks, Caitlin. Well, I want to thank everyone for being here, for showing up, how you're showing up, for the work that you all do, because you really make a difference, and we see it. We all see it. So thank you. In the case review that we did today, you heard a number of recommendations that were developed by members of the team. There were many other recommendations that we could have discussed, but did not because of time and because of the players that were in the room. But for example, we heard from law enforcement that there were several National Integrated Ballistics Imaging Network hits on the casings. We heard that there was one a month prior and one that was older. So thinking about what can we learn from that process, explaining it to the others in the room and what information might be available and how can we use that. We also heard that the weapon that was used in this incident was a stolen weapon, and it was stolen from a vehicle. Well, thinking about what are we currently doing in our community about weapons that are stolen out of vehicles, how many cases do we have where a weapon has been stolen and is recovered as part of a crime? So just thinking about pulling those different threads and thinking about what do we know, what do we need to know, and is there an opportunity that we missed for prevention and intervention. And although we talked about one case today, and we came up with some recommendations, the recommendations that were discussed are really applicable to after-set parties in general. About how do we move from ideas that are shared, information that is shared, and developing a recommendation. So you also heard some discussion at the end of the meeting about a recommendations subcommittee that was going to be happening and an executive leadership meeting that was happening. So the process really incorporates the findings and the recommendations of the case reviews that are then taken to a group to help really move those recommendations forward, fine-tuning the recommendation, identifying the action plan, and then moving it towards execution, which means taking it to the executive leadership team and working with them to move the recommendation from an idea to a reality. If you're interested in more information about violence reduction councils, please use this link to the Violence Reduction Council Toolkit, which is a community approach to saving lives.